This project from below, right? Is that what they teach you in? Yeah. Anyway, I'd like to share with you a perspective that Chazal have, and it really begins with the following. Moshe Rabbeinu was charged with the ultimate mission to take the Jewish nation out of Mitzrayim, take them out of enslavement, bring the Klal Yisrael to that ultimate level of being the chosen nation. However, from the moment that he embarked on this endeavor, not only didn't he succeed, it went very, very badly. From the moment he entered Mitzrayim, not only wasn't the shibud, not only wasn't the enslavement lightened, it became far more egregious, far more oppressive. And whilst the Klal Yisrael had been working very, very difficultly and had been very much tortured, it became worse and worse. And at a certain point, Moshe Rabbeinu, being the manhig, being the leader, felt the pain of the Klal Yisrael, and he turns to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and he says the words, Lama hare'osa la'am hazeh. Why have you made it bad for this people? Lama zeh shalachtani. Why did you send me? Hashem, you have some cheshbon, you have some reason. If you wish to make the oppression deeper, if you wish to make the suffering worse, count me out of it. I don't want to be a part of it. And whilst those words were said out of a true love, a true concern for the Klal Yisrael, the Gemara tells us that there was a tefiyah, there was a complaint against Moshe Rabbeinu. And the Gemara in Sanhedrin explains to us that Hashem says, Chaval al di avdim v'lo mishtachim. It's a shame that which we used to have, but we no longer have. Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, those were great men. I appeared to Avram and I told him to take his son. I told him to take his son and to slaughter him. There were many, many questions he could have asked. Many questions that Yitzchak could have asked. Many questions that Yaakov could have asked. But not once did they ask. You, Moshe, the first bump in the road, it's Lama hare'os lama zeh. Why have you made it difficult? Lama zeh shalachtani. You're asking questions. Chaval al di avdim v'lo mishtachim. They don't make them like they used to. And that's the Gemara. And it seems very clear from this Gemara that not only is there a complaint against Moshe Rabbeinu, but it seems that Hashem is presenting us a ranking system. Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, those were great men. Moshe, you're not on their level. Those men didn't question me. You did. You're not on their level. And if we were to take this Gemara in isolation, we would assume that the Avos were way up here. Moshe Rabbeinu, as great as he was nowhere on that level. The problem with this Gemara is that we know the opposite to be true. And the Rambam tells us that the single greatest human being who ever lived was Moshe Rabbeinu. He was the Av b'chokhmah b'nevuah. He was the father of every prophet. He had reached a level of clarity. No other human being saw Hashem with that absolute understanding, with that absolute clarity. The expression the Achronim uses, Bechir shbemin hanushi, single greatest human, unique amongst every person. So here's the question. If in fact we know that Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest person, towering even over the Avos, how do we understand this Gemara? Where this Gemara seems to imply that Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, those were great men. Moshe, you're not on their level. It seems that Hashem himself is saying that Moshe was nowhere near the Avos, yet we know the opposite to be true. So I'd like to see if we could better understand this Gemara and understand what this Gemara is sharing with us. And to do that, I'd like to share with you some definitions. We, as from Jews, are very comfortable with certain words. Emunah, Bitachon, Emunah, Bitachon. You have to have Bitachon, you have to trust. If you press your friends for a definition, ask them exactly what that means. What does Emunah mean? And what does Bitachon mean? I dare say most people can't accurately define it. And I'd like to share with you the definition of Emunah and the definition of Bitachon, and I think we'll quickly see that not only are the definitions interesting, but they're very separate and very distinct. The easiest way to define Emunah is to take the first of the Rambam's Animamim Be'emunah Shalema. I accept with an absolute understanding Shabori Yisbarach, that the Creator, who Bore Umanhig, He is the Creator and one who orchestrates the world. He alone did and does and will do every activity on the planet. In plain, simple language, no happenstance, no rank, rare occurrences, no things that just happen. Hashem guiding the world. every single activity on the planet guided, measured, weighed, controlled by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's Emunah. Knowing, understanding, perceiving that Hashem runs the world. But that's not Bitachon. And the Chovos HaLevavos defines Bitachon as trusting in Hashem, relying in Hashem, taking my heavy load and transferring it to Hashem. Understanding that I cannot predict my future, I cannot control my destiny. I take my heavy load, I place it on Hashem, I say, Hashem, you are the master of the world. Upon you I rely, in you I trust. Emunah is knowing that Hashem runs the world, and Bitachon is then trusting in Hashem. And amazingly, you could have Emunah. You could know that Hashem runs the world, and you don't necessarily trust in Hashem. And I'll share with you some examples of exactly that phenomenon. One is a gentleman named Paro. Eitza Amuka. And the Gemara said, very deep advice, very wise advice he gave his people. When he realized that the Jewish nation is prospering, that they're beginning to outnumber the Mitzrim, he decided on a path of infanticide, of killing out all of the children. But he said to his people, very, very carefully, do it this way. Don't burn them, don't hang them, drown the babies in the Nile. It wasn't just a convenient way of killing them. The Gemara explains to us that he did it for a reason. He says, I know that Hashem pays back midah keneged midah, measure for measure. I also know that Hashem promised the generation of Noah that he would never bring another flood. If I burn them, Hashem will pay us back that way. If I hang them, Hashem will pay us back. But if we drown the babies, Hashem will want to pay us back by drowning us. Hashem promised he would not bring another flood. Drown the babies. Wise advice. But here's the point. The man had a very clear sense of Hashem's presence. He was aware even of Hashem's system for running the world. Midah keneged midah, measure for measure. He had Emunah. He recognized that Hashem is present and active in running of the world. But he didn't trust in Hashem. He didn't rely on Hashem. Quite the opposite. He was waging a war against Hashem. Emunah is the cognition, the recognition that Hashem runs the world. And Bitachon is the next step, where therefore I trust in you. Therefore I rely on you. Paro had clear Emunah, but zero Bitachon. And I've seen this in my own life as well. I was a high school Rebbe for many years, and there was a fellow, I distinctly recall, at least once a week I had to deprogram. At least once a week I would have to sit this fellow down, and when he'd come to me with his version of life, Hashem is out to get me. Hashem is out to get me. And he would show me the machinations, he would show me the events. You see, this guy said that, this guy said that. You see, Hashem is out to get me. He saw Hashem in his world. He saw Hashem actively in his life, but didn't trust in Hashem. Quite the opposite. Hashem is out to get me. God is out to make my life difficult. And that was an example of a person who understood that Hashem runs the world, but didn't recognize the chesed, the kindness, didn't recognize the fact that Hashem was on his side, and clearly didn't trust in Hashem. And I believe that that, in fact, is the answer to this Gemara. You see, there never was nor ever will be a human being who reached Moshe Rabbeinu's level. And Moshe Rabbeinu saw with total clarity of thought. This object is present, it's palpable, I'm fully aware of its presence. Moshe Rabbeinu saw Hashem with that level of clarity. Bas baklaria ha'me'iria, literally transparent. Right there, saw Hashem with absolute clarity of vision. No human being will ever reach that level. But that's Emunah. That's knowledge of Hashem. Bitachon is something different. And Bitachon is unwavering trust. Hashem, you promised me that Yitzhak will be the progenitor, the father of the Jewish nation. And Hashem, you told me to kill that very son. That's a contradiction. And I don't know the answer to that question. But because I don't know the answer doesn't mean that you don't know the answer. Hashem, in you I trust, upon you I rely, I follow dutifully. Unwavering trust. Bitachon is almost a midah. It's almost a character trait. You could certainly hear how the Avos might have worked on a midah of a nova, one greater than the other. Bitachon is almost like a character trait. Meaning to say there never was nor ever will be a human being who saw with total clarity, Hashem, that was the greatness of Moshe, and he was the singular greatest human being who ever lived. But this Bitachon, learning to trust, learning that there's something black, something dark in front of me, but just because I don't understand doesn't mean Hashem doesn't, and therefore I still rely on Hashem. Apparently the Avos had developed that trait to a greater extent. Says Hashem to Moshe, as great as you are, the Avos reached a greater level in Bitachon, in trust, and that's what the Gemara is sharing with us. As great as you are, Moshe, you're not compared to the Avos in this area called Bitachon, in this area called trust. And I believe that this understanding that Emunah and Bitachon are distinct traits is key to beginning to working on them. Because once you understand the concepts, once you can relate to them and define them, then you could start working on them. And I'd like to share with you a little bit of a progressive, step-by-step analyzation. First of Emunah, and then of Bitachon, and then we'll see how we could apply it in our own lives. Let's start with Emunah. There are 4 basic levels to Emunah. The first basic level of Emunah is knowing that Hashem created the world. Knowing that there was nothing, an absolute vacuum, absence of anything. Hashem said, Vayihi, and everything came into being. Now, you may say, that's obvious. We're all ma'aminim, we're all believers, we all recognize that. That's simple. And I'd like to share with you all, on one level that may be true, it's also not so simple. And I'll prove it to you. 1/7 of our life. 1/7 of our life centers around that single cognition. Shabbos is Zeichel L'Maaseh Bereshis. The focal point of Shabbos is stop creative acts. Why? So that I should get it. So that I should understand that there is a creator. So that I should understand it not in some theoretical kind of iffy, sort of wishy-washy way, but to feel it. So that I should walk out into a valley and say, Marabu Masech Hashem, your works are wondrous. I should have a constant, unending sense of astonishment and wonder by Hashem's creation. And I should have a constant sense of chizuk by seeing Hashem. A live, vibrant, constant, unending stream of strengthening because I see Hashem's world. And when you focus on this, and when you think about it, it becomes a different world that you live. I remember having a conversation with my daughter when she was 6, and she said to me an interesting line. She said, Abba, I get it. And before Hashem created Shemayim v'Aretz, there was nothing. There were no trees, there were no rivers. I get that. But Abba, what color was it? If you close your eyes and imagine the moment before creation, if you close your eyes and imagine the moment before Hashem brought forth physicality, what do you see? You see blackness. But you see blackness is a color. There was no color, no atoms, no quarks. There was no physicality. And if you close your eyes and imagine that moment from absolute vacuum, from absolute absence of anything, Hashem said, Vayehi, and everything that my eye sees came into being. 100 billion galaxies, each one containing 100 billion stars, each as powerful as our sun, spread across this wide expanse of the known universe, 13 billion light years and ever expanding. And when you contemplate that, when you understand that, there's one more step that you have to take. The Mishnah Berurah, in his introduction to Chelik Shlishi, says, if I understand that Hashem created the world, there's a corollary concept. I also understand that Hashem created me. You see, it's very nice to know that Hashem made the mountains and the rivers and the skies and the sun. That's very impressive. But that means I too wasn't, and Hashem said I should be, and Hashem made me. And explains in Mesilas Yesharim that is a core central point to understand. Why? Because once I get that, I understand that I'm here. I was put here for a few short years, and then I have to ask myself the next question. Gee golly, why? Why did Hashem put me on a planet? What am I here for? What's life about? What does Hashem want from me? At the end of my days, I'm going to have to answer to Hashem, what does Hashem expect of me? Zeichel L'Maaseh Bereshis. Why is Shabbos so central to everything? Because it brings forth to us the understanding that Hashem is the active creator of all physicality. Hashem maintains this world, and it also brings us to the key central thought of existence. Why did Hashem create me? Why am I here? What's life about? So, whilst the first level of Emunah may sound simple, knowing that this world has a creator, it requires an awful lot of introspection, an awful lot of thought, and it could literally change your life. Okay, but that's the first level. The second level of Emunah is a bit different. The second level of Emunah is knowing that Hashem runs the world in a global sense, big picture issues, that Hashem sits there, watches the world, sort of, if you can imagine that grand master on the multi-level chessboard, putting this pawn into position, moving this bishop, arranging and orchestrating the future of humanity. If you'd like to understand the second level of Emunah, I say all you have to know is, this is LA, folks, huh? The LA Times. There is such a paper called the LA Times? Okay. The headlines of the Los Angeles Times are written on Rosh Hashanah. But not just the headlines of that day's paper. The headlines of every single day in the coming years are written on Rosh Hashanah. But it's not just the headlines, it's the op-ed pieces, it's the international, national, local news. Humanity's fate is decided by Hashem. Which country goes to war, which country suffers famine, which country enjoys beautiful, wonderful prosperity, which new technologies are brought to the market, which new medicines are discovered, and which peoples will suffer in what way. But it's a very, very large world. 6.5 billion occupants on the planet. I don't know about the Los Angeles Times, but I know that the New York Times bragged about having 465 full-time correspondents, 16 news bureaus, because there's an awful lot of stuff going on the planet, each one interlinked, each one interwoven, many, many, many issues. And knowing and understanding that Hashem sits there as a shofet, as a judge on Rosh Hashanah, and determines mankind's fate. That is the second level of Emunah, and knowing that Hashem is involved in the big picture issues. And what that means as a frum Jew is that when you open the newspapers and you read about a new terrorist threat, you read about Iran's very, very imminent being nuclear capable, and you have the following sense: wow, I can't wait to see how Hashem gets us out of this one. Wow, this is beautiful. Let me watch as my Creator, the Master of the heavens and the earth, moves the pawns. Look at that scary puppet. Ooh, I'm so afraid of him. But that's the understanding that a thinking Jew should have when he reads the papers, if he does read the papers. But looking out at the world and understanding that there's a master. Hashem is putting each of them in their place, arranging, orchestrating, and nothing happens by happenstance. Nothing just occurs. Hashem runs the big picture issues of life. That's the second level of Emunah. The first is knowing that there is a Creator. And the second is knowing that Hashem is active in the big picture issues of life. And now we come to the third level. So, to share with you the third level of Emunah, I want you to imagine the following. Imagine that you heard that there's this nice rabbi from Muncie. His name is Rabbi Schaefer. I hear he's a very sweet guy. I hear every Shabbos, every Friday afternoon, he goes to this old woman's house. She's an almana. She's a widow. I hear he shops for her. I hear he helps her clean the apartment. I hear he's even on his knees scrubbing the floor. Wow, what a tzaddik. You're very impressed. Until you find out that this woman has an estate worth $10 million and has no living heirs. Ah, big tzaddik, yeah. On the floor scrubbing. I'm very impressed. Here's the point. My intentions don't color my action. My intentions define the action. If it's a generous, magnanimous act of helping Nebuch, a poor old woman, or if it's a self-centered attempt of getting my hands on her money, is defined by my intention. My intentions define the action. And with that as an observation, I'd like to share with you the third level of Emunah. The third level of Emunah is knowing that Hashem knows exactly what I'm thinking as I'm thinking those thoughts. Hashem peers into the essence of me and knows exactly what I'm thinking. And while this may sound a bit esoteric, it's actually very obvious. if I claim to believe in schar va'onish, if I claim that I understand that I'll be richly rewarded or punished for what I do on my stay on this planet, then perforce I understand that Hashem knows my thoughts. Because if not, there's no mishpat. How could I believe that Hashem is going to judge me if Hashem doesn't know my kavanah, if Hashem doesn't know my intention? How could I believe that Hashem is going to reward me if Hashem doesn't know where I'm at? But the third level of Emunah is knowing that Hashem peers into the essence of me, knows my past, knows my future, knows exactly where I'm holding. And we human beings are oftentimes very judgmental and oftentimes very wrong. Let me share with you one small example. A number of years back, there was a small shtibel in Lakewood, and they made a decision that they wanted to have a very serious davening, and they asked the members that if you want to take your kids to shul, there's a shul up the block, there's a shul down the block, please take your children to one of the other base medrashes. Our base medrash, we want to have a very serious davening, no children. They voted on it, they decided that was a policy, kachava, they put up the sign, sent out the emails, everyone agreed. Okay. The Gabbai, who was very active in putting up the signs, sending out the emails, etc., shows up to davening on Rosh Hashanah, puts his talents over his head, starts davening, and at a certain point, close to Baruch Hu, right in front of the Gabbai walks in a man with 5 kids in tow. And the 5 kids sit down right in front of the Gabbai. The Gabbai's livid, a chutzpah, there's a sign on the door. We told everyone. And he sits right, the Gabbai doesn't say a word, it's Rosh Hashanah, a little davening. Davening continues, one kid elbows the other, another the other, the candy wrappers start flying back and forth, the Gabbai's turning purple and red and pink, chutzpah. And the Gabbai barely held his tongue. Until it was time for Kaddish Yosem, when the man and his 5 sons got up and said the Yortzeit Kaddish, and then the Gabbai understood. The man didn't read the sign. The 5 boys didn't read the sign because the man was sitting shiva for his wife. The boys were sitting shiva for their mother. That's why they didn't read the sign. And the Gabbai was glad he held his tongue. We're very good at judging. I know where he's coming from. I know where she's at. I'm the judge. We don't have a clue. But if I claim that I believe Hashem is the Shofet Mishpat, if I claim that I believe Hashem will justly reward me when my days are done, then perforce I accept the fact that Hashem knows exactly where I'm coming from. Hashem knows my background. Hashem knows this situation today. Is it a difficult Nisayan, or is it something I'm just blowing off? Is this a really difficult test, or is it whatever? Hashem knows my past, knows my history, knows exactly what I'm thinking as I'm thinking it. In fact, if you like a mushal, I remember back in high school days, there was this lucite man. Most high school labs have a model of a man. It's sort of, the outside is lucite, transparent, and plastic, and you could peer in and you could see the organs. There's the heart, the lung, the liver. The next time you daven Shemona Esrei, I want you to think of the following. I don't have to express my words. Yiyu l'ratzon imrei fi. The last pasuk we say at the end of Shemona Esrei, Hashem, my words, the words that come out of my mouth should find favor in your heart, v'hegyon libi, and the thoughts of my heart. I don't have to express myself for Hashem to hear it. Hashem reads my heart. I express them for me. But Hashem peers into me, directly into me. I'm like that lucite man. Hashem knows my kavanah. Hashem knows my intentions. Hashem peers directly into me. And that's the third level of Emunah, knowing that Hashem knows my thoughts as I'm thinking them. However, if level 1 is knowing that Hashem created the world, and level 2 is knowing that Hashem runs the big picture, the global issue, and level 3 is knowing that Hashem knows my thoughts, number 4 is where the real action is at. And to demonstrate level 4, let me share with you the following example. I want you to imagine that it's a February day, and let's go to the East Coast because it's colder over there, and the scene gets a bit more vivid. Imagine it's a cold, bitter winter day, and I'm walking on the street, and it's kind of late at night, and there's a street that I typically don't walk by, and all of a sudden a car stops, 3 thugs jump out, one holds a gun pointed directly to my head. Here is a very deep philosophical question. A number of months ago on Rosh Hashanah, I said the words, Hashem, I accept the fact that you decree who lives and who dies. And the question is, what good is that decree when right now my life is in the hands of this drug-crazed kid? What good is that decree that Hashem made many months ago when this kid controls my destiny? Whether I live or die is within his power. The basic bedrock of our Emunah system is knowing that there's no happenstance. And what that means in plain simple language is that if on the previous Rosh Hashanah Hashem decreed my life is over and this is the last year of my life, there is nothing that I or you can do to change that. It's Seisem L'Shalom, it's over, it's done with. However, if the decree on the previous Rosh Hashanah was L'Chaim, then there are many, many ways that Hashem will get me out of that situation. The kid will drop the gun, it'll misfire. Someone calls in a false alarm and the entire New York City Fire Department shows up on the scene. A cab driver, for some unknown reason, shows up. Many, many shluchim, many, many messengers that Hashem brings about. But here's the point. If I accept the fact that Hashem decrees who will live and who will die, perforce I accept the fact that Hashem is on the scene 24/7, 365 to carry out that decree. The imlav kain, because if that weren't true, the decree is nonsense. If I stand there in Rosh Hashanah and say, Hashem, I accept the fact that you are the master of the world. You decree mankind's fate, then perforce I accept the fact that Hashem is with me all day, every day. When I put my head down on the pillow at night, when I open my eyes in the morning, when I get behind the wheel of my car to drive. By the way, how many people die on the U.S. highway system every year? Don't know? Pick a number. 10, 15, 25? How about 40,000? How many U.S. soldiers died in Vietnam in all the war years? About 45, maybe 50,000. About as many U.S. citizens die every year on the highway system as all the U.S. soldiers died in the Vietnam War era. 40 to 50,000 people die every year. Oh my goodness, I'm staying off the highway. Oh, but there's a greater incident of car accidents on local streets than on highways. Don't go back on the highway. I'm not driving. Think about it. You're walking down the street. You ever read the paper? You walk down the street, crane falls on a man, kills him. Man's walking down the street, all of a sudden the sidewalk collapses. You walk into an elevator, there's no cab. You ever read the papers? If you pay attention to what's going on in the world, it's a very scary world. A very frightening with a lot of things that are happening all day. People die left, right, and center. Microbes invade bodies and the guy's dead. Guy goes on a plane, all of a sudden, plane, I don't know. We don't know what happened. Lost pressure, I don't know, crashed into the mountains. Sorry. If I understand that Hashem decrees on Rosh Hashanah whether I will live or die, that means I understand Hashem is with me 24/7, 365, all the time, with me all day long, with me when I get behind the wheel of the car, with me as I walk into that elevator cab, with me as I walk down the street, with me Yoman V'Layla, day and night. Hashem is present, Hashem is guarding me. As a matter of fact, if you'd like to understand the first concept of Emunah, it's that I walk down the street with a lucite bubble. That lucite bubble protects me. You can't penetrate it. No human being can affect my destiny. You can't help me. You can't hurt me. You could be the wealthiest person in the world. You could wish to do me the best favor in the world. If it's not destined to come to me, you can't change my destiny. And on the flip side, you could wish to hurt me, and you could wish to harm me. If that pain is not coming to me, there's nothing that you could do. As a matter of fact, I'd like to share with you something very, very penetrating. You probably had a teacher in 3rd grade who taught you how to take a compliment, right? You remember that teacher? She would say, don't squirm, don't look away, look the person in the eye and say, thank you, right? Smile and say, thank you. That's how you take a compliment. Did you ever have a teacher teach you how to take an insult? The Chovos HaLevavos says, I'll teach you how to take an insult. And when someone cuts you to the core, when someone digs into you, a really vicious barb, you should turn your eyes to heaven and say, thank you Hashem for revealing a little of my many flaws. Thank you Hashem for bringing this to me. You see, this person cannot affect me. He can't help me. He can't harm me. If it weren't destined for me to suffer this pain, he is powerless to change that. I didn't ask him to be the nudnik to bring me the message, but that message is coming to me from Hashem. As a matter of fact, when you understand this properly, you have a different version of life, a different perspective on life. Imagine for a minute that I actually had a microphone, which would be a good thing to have. Imagine I had a microphone in my hand and I'm speaking. And imagine there's this big speaker, big loud speaker that you could easily hear me from. And imagine that I point to someone and I say, "You're a bleepity bleepity, I start insulting you." And you get so angry at me that you stand up and you walk right over to the speaker, right into the subwoofer. That would not be such a clever thing to do. If you punch me, we could debate whether it's clever or not. But why do you punch the speaker? It says the Chovos Halevos, if you understand how Hashem runs the world, you'll understand that this person is a puppet. The one who insulted me, the one who brought me that message is but a loudspeaker. That message has someone behind the mic speaking. That's Hashem who's delivering the message. Again, I didn't ask you to be the nudnik. You and I will have words later about it, but that message is being brought to me by Hashem. And this understanding is so pervasive because it changes every relationship, changes every happenstance, every occurrence that we just look at as, oh, that's one of those things that happen in life. And you begin to get the picture. That's Hashem. That's God involved, intimately involved in the everyday runnings of my life. And if you'd like to make this message real, I'll share with you a Musar exercise. Tomorrow morning, when you open your eyes, before you say the words Moda'ani, try the following. Say the words, "Good morning, Hashem." Now, let me caution you. If you're married, make sure that your spouse doesn't hear you, because he or she is going to look at you like, "What are you talking to the walls? What are you? Thank you, Hashem." Like, what are you doing? You see, the words Moda'ani, Hashem, I'm appreciative. I acknowledge you, and I recognize that which you've done to me, becomes rote. We forget what the words mean. If you wake up in the morning, you say, "Good morning, Hashem. I acknowledge your presence. I'm aware that you're here." Not 13 billion light years up there in Shemayim, not running the world in the global sense, somewhere from a distance, right here, present. By the way, anyone here ever make a shahakol bracha? I was a high school Rebbe for many years. Part of the job of a Jew is to be an observant Jew. And as an observant Jew, I noticed that Ashkenazic Jews have a minhag. Ashkenazic Jews have this minhag, and initially I thought it was a muscle twitch. You ever watch somebody, before they ingest beverage or food, they have this sort of nervous muscle twitch? It's like this. You ever notice it? As a high school Rebbe, I used to watch you guys, and I one time noticed that it's almost universal. So I wanted to know what it was. I realized it wasn't a muscle twitch because guys asked Shiloh first, do I do this bracha, that bracha, that bracha? So clearly it was controlled, but I didn't know what it was. So I one time put my ear close, and I heard what it was. It's this. Shakavaro. Yeah. Before you drink water, before you what you do is you say, Shakavaro. Shakavaro. Okay, good. Listen to the words. Baruch Ata Hashem, blessed be you Hashem, present, right here. I, little me, am speaking directly to you here. I acknowledge your presence. I'm aware that you are the creator and one who runs the world. Elokeinu, our God, Melech HaOlam, King of the world, Shakol, that everything, Nihiyeh, was and is, was brought into creation and is maintained bidvaro, with your words. There was absence of physicality. Hashem, you said Vayehi, and not only did you create everything, you maintain it. Osemasa bereshit, constantly infusing energy, constantly keeping it in existence. A mountain, a rock is Hashem. When I see that stream, and when I see that rock, I see Hashem. Why? Because nothing in physicality could continue existing without Hashem keeping it, infusing energy, keeping it where it is. Could you imagine if once a day we stopped the static, stopped the busyness and said, Hashem, I acknowledge your presence right here. Hashem, I recognize that you brought everything into creation. Could you imagine the effect it would have on us? My friends, we're supposed to make more than one bracha a day. Chayiv Adam Levarach, a man's obligated to make 100 brachas a day. 100 times a day we're supposed to stop and recognize Hashem is here, right here. Could you imagine such a life? 100 times a day. Hashem, I know you're here. Hashem, I'm aware of your presence. Hashem, I feel you here. What a lofty existence. But that lofty, esoteric existence is something that not only we're all obligated in, and if we're obligated in, it's within our capacity to do. But you got to work on it. The first level of Emunah is knowing that Hashem created the world. The second level of Emunah is knowing that Hashem runs the big picture, the global issues. The third level of Emunah is knowing that Hashem peers into my essence. Hashem reads my heart. Hashem knows my kavanas. The fourth level of Emunah is knowing that Hashem is intimately involved in the runnings of my life. Hashem is present, involved in my day-to-day activities. But you see, all of that is within the realm of Emunah. That has nothing to do with Bitachon. And Bitachon is a whole different ball of wax. And Bitachon is when I understand that, and then I do the next step, which is Hashem, I take my heavy load and I place it upon you. I cannot control market economies. I cannot determine whether my industry will remain on this continent or will be shipped over to India. I cannot control my health. I cannot control my existence. If I walk on the wrong side of the street and I wasn't paying attention and a car comes careening over the curb, it's history, as in I am history. One stray bullet, one lone microbe, and I is no more. I recognize my frailty. I recognize my mortality. And I recognize the fact that Hashem, you run the world, and I trust in you. I rely on you. I recognize that I can't do it. Hashem, I take my heavy load and place it upon you. You are my creator. You run the world, and I trust in you. That's Bitachon. Now, how do you know where you're holding in Bitachon? Emunah is a cognition. It's an understanding. But how do you know whether you trust in Hashem, to what level you trust in Hashem? How do you take your temperature? So I'd like to share with you 3 little litmus tests. If you want to know how you're doing in this thing called Bitachon, I'll share 3 interesting tests. Number 1. Now the ladies are much better at this one than the guys, but we'll share it across the borders here. Here's the question. Anyone here ever experienced something called anxiety, as in nervous, as in, oh my goodness, how am I going to pay my mortgage? What's going to be with my kids? What's going to be anxiety? What if I share with you, if I had total, complete bitachon, fear, dread, anxiety would not be in my emotional makeup. A sense of trust, a sense of order, a sense of Hashem runs the world. I don't know where this is going to lead, but I know I'm being led. I don't know what my ultimate good is, but Hashem does. But more than that, Hashem is with me 24/7, guiding. Nervousness, anxiety, worries, troubles don't exist in a Baal Bitachon's vernacular. Now folks, don't get me wrong. You don't just open the shar Bitachon, you don't just come to a Bitachon share and instant Bitachon. We will suffer nervousness and anxiety. But when you feel that, when you feel that sense of nervousness, that's when it's time to say, I get it. That's the eye-opener. That's the indicator to me that it's time to work on this area. That's the time for me to recognize that I don't run the world. Hashem does, and that's the time to work on Bitachon. So the first indicator of your level of Bitachon is your level of anxiety. Here's the second one. A number of years ago, and at this point quite a number, I was a fan of Amazon.com. I was a high school Rebbe, and I did a lot of reading. I felt I needed secular material. You may, if you listen to the Shmuz, you'll probably notice that I often quote different things. My kids used to joke, Amazon delivers twice a week to my doorstep. In any case, I was a big fan because they, every time, on time, every time, exactly as delivered, I thought they were a very well-structured organization. In any case, I heard that they were going public. It was still in Kollel at the time. I was giving the share sort of on the side. Money was not plentiful, but I said to my wife, I'd like to invest in the initial public offering. It sounds like a very well-run company. I believe in the concept, and I want to invest in it. My wife said, listen, if you feel confident about it, go ahead. So the plan was the next day I was going to invest. I was going to buy $2,000 of the IPO, and that was the plan. Okay. That evening, for some reason, my wife opens up Newsweek, and there's an article about Amazon. Jeff Bezos has $1 million in personal credit card debt. He's asking for $15 a share. There's no previous history. There's no way the company is worth anywhere near that. Ragging on and on against Amazon.com. My wife brings me the article, asks me to read it. I read it. She says, do you still want to invest? I say, what do you want me to do? She says, I don't know. I'm a little nervous. I said, you don't want me to do it? I'm not doing it. Kacha, we did not invest in the IPO. Okay. Now, let's imagine for a minute that I had. Let's imagine that I took that $2,000, invested it in Amazon, and held it to today. Those $2,000 would currently be worth $1.4 million. Now listen, Baruch Hashem, we don't lack, but I could think of some clever things to do with $1.4 million. Ah, shucks. Ah, shucks is a lack of bitachon. Because if I understand that Hashem decrees on Rosh Hashanah how much money I make, that means Hashem decrees how much money I make. The fact that my wife should read that particular article the night before and not Business Week, which had a different take on the IPO. The fact that she read any part at all right then and happened to bring it to me was the Yad Hashem. Now, in this case, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand why a young fellow might be better off without the 1.4 million, especially if he's headed on a chinuch career. But the point is, knowing this fact, that Hashem runs the world, means I have no regrets. I use my acumen. I use my best judgment. I think, I consult. I consult with the first expert, with the second expert. I use my best judgment. I make a decision, and then I rest assured I've done my part, and exactly what Hashem wants to be will be. All the should'ves, could'ves, and would'ves disappear. Now don't get me wrong. If I was lazy, if I was indifferent, if I didn't do an appropriate ishtadlus, if I wasn't rational, sane, and sober in my approach to the world, then there should be a lot of shucks. But the shucks is because I didn't do my part. But if I was prudent, if I was wise, if I used my best judgment, and I went out into the marketplace, I then did my best job, and I trust in Hashem. Hashem will arrange this year whether I'll make $50,000, $500,000, $5 million. Hashem runs the world, and Hashem runs it for the best. Any sense of should'ves, could'ves, would'ves, the sense of shucks disappear. Okay, here's the third. Anyone recently have suffered a financial setback? In the past 2.5 years have been some pretty rocky times for many, many people. I've watched people's portfolios go like... I'm involved in a non-profit organization called the Shmuz.com. Many, many people who are serious contributors have become like not such serious contributors. And not because they don't believe in the cause, and not because they don't, but... okay, here's the observation. If you have this sense of, oh my goodness, I'm in desperate, dire straits, the market is crashing, and I'm in trouble, and you feel like you're in a free fall, you're just falling to your collapse, now know and understand exactly what you trusted in. You now recognize that you relied on, put your trust fully in the U.S. economy. In the U.S. dollar we trust. In God we like to believe, have faith, come to the prayer services to pretend we believe. But in the U.S. economy we trust. In the almighty dollar we put our faith. And how do you know in whom you trust? It's when it's pulled out from under you and you feel that you're in a deep fall, a free fall, then you recognize in what you trusted. You see, if you feel that you're abandoned and you're in desperate, dire straits, you now recognize it's because you trust in the things other than Hashem. And the Chovos HaLevavos explains to us that if you trust in anything other than Hashem, He guarantees eventually it will fail you. If you trust in your business acumen, eventually the markets will rise, the markets will fall, you'll find yourself, If you trust in your health, I'm young, healthy, and well, it's going to happen eventually. Anything that you trust in other than Hashem will eventually leave you. And the way you know in what you trusted is when the doctor says, son, I got some bad news for you, and you feel abject terror. And when you feel that the core of your essence, you're abandoned and you're in desperate straits, now you know that you trusted in your health, well-being, in the way it was, always will be. And that's the time to begin really, really dealing with your beliefs, with your Emunah. It's a lot better to deal with them now, before the scene. But when you feel yourself in that free fall, that's the time to recognize that's my test. Now I got to see in what I trusted. Now I got to see in what I relied. And now you get to do the very difficult thing called changing your belief system. Starting to recognize who runs the world. Emunah is the cognition, the understanding that Hashem created and runs the world. Bitachon is relying, trusting, having faith in Hashem. The tests of Bitachon are pretty straightforward. Anxiety, the shucks, and finally, when you feel yourself abandoned, when you feel that which you trusted in has been pulled out from under you, that's when you recognize that you trusted in things other than Hashem. Our job throughout this life is to learn to see Hashem more and more in our daily existence. And our job is to learn to have faith in Hashem more and more. Before I close, two last observations. How do you grow in Bitachon? So I believe that there are two concepts that are critical to growing in Bitachon. One is very simple and the other is very difficult. The first one is a rather simple one. The first one is knowing that Hashem cares about me more than I care about me. That Hashem loves me more than I love me. That Hashem has my best interest at heart to an extent even greater than I do. And as difficult as that may sound, it's actually quite simple to see. All you got to do is read your own story. Every Jew has a story. How'd you end up here? How'd you end up in this point in life? You tell your story to other people. Listen to your story. It just so happened I met this one and this one and this one. And every Jew has a story. We live 12-minute walk from Ar Sameach. The guys, I try to have the guys over as often as I can. And there's a rule at the Schaefer house, you got to tell your story. And my kids sit there, mouths agape, as each guy tells a story, one better than the next. This happened and this happened, I was here and there. It's astonishing. But you see the Ashkacha, you see the Yad Hashem, you see Hashem taking a person from the boondocks, from the far, far out, and bringing him in. But each of us have our story. And when you read your own story, you see it vividly, palpably right in front of you, and you see Hashem guiding you, and you see Hashem walking you through life. And that step's easy. It's a second step that really is difficult, and it's a second step that kind of baffles most people. That second step, excuse me, is the fact that, I hate to say it this way, folks, but most of us play God. Most of us play God. I'll explain to you what playing God means. Playing God means I know exactly what I need. I need to marry that woman. I need that job. I need my kid to get into that class. That's what I need. Now, not only is it clear, but I've even explained it to Hashem. I've davened, I've brokered deals with God. I've explained it to him, and for some reason Hashem just won't play along. Now I don't get it. Hashem, what's the deal? I made it clear to you. I explained it to you. And I showed you that this is what I need. Hashem, what's the deal? Are you angry at me? Are you punishing me? Hashem, why won't you just give me what I need? Would you like to know what the problem there is? The problem is that I'm playing God. I'm pretending that I know what I need. I'm pretending that I know where I'll be in 2 years from now, in 10 years from now. I'm pretending that I know exactly what I need, and I don't have a clue. How many happy young couples find themselves divorced 6 months later? How many times do you find that you needed just that job, somehow you didn't get it, and that entire industry was shipped over to China? How many times do you find out that that class that you had to have your kid get into, and turns out that there were 1 or 2 kids in that class who were the worst possible influences on your child? When you recognize the fact that I am but a mortal, and I have but limited sight, I see about 2 inches in front of my eye, then you can begin trusting in Hashem. You see, when you turn to Hashem and you say, Hashem, I don't know. In my judgment, this seems to be good. But you're the creator of the heavens and the earth. You are the master of this world. In you I trust. Hashem, guide me properly. And when you try and things don't go, you did your appropriate ishtadlus. You put in your best effort. And the doors are closed. You say, I get it. Hashem, you know better than me. I trust in you. I rely on you. You have my best interests at heart. You love me. And if you'd like a mushal to understand this, it doesn't mean that everything is going to be great. Doesn't mean every moment of your life is going to be happiness and satisfaction. That's not quite what life is about. But it's an understanding that Hashem is there. And the mushal to this is very simple. If you imagine a woman taking her young child by the hand, taking a 5-year-old for chemotherapy. The child knows this is going to be very painful. But the child trusts her mother. And the child knows that the mother has her best interest in heart. And the child has full faith that what a mother is doing is for her best. And that understanding excuse me, is how we have to go through life. Hashem is with me 24/7. Excuse me, Hashem is right there. And I trust in Hashem, and I rely on Hashem, and I know that Hashem loves me more than I love me, but more than that, I know that Hashem knows better than I what's for my best. Not only does Hashem care for me more than I care for me, Hashem understands the big picture. Hashem knows where I'll be 5 years from now, 20 years from now. Hashem sees the global picture, and therefore I rely on Hashem, I trust in Hashem. Emunah is feeling, being knowledgeable that Hashem runs the world. Bitachon is then trusting in Hashem, relying, having faith in Hashem. Let me close with one last story. It's a story that I'm very fond of because it happened to a friend of mine. Rabbi Summers knows the person very well. Very well. Chaim Chopper was learning in Kollel. He was living in Kew Gardens. And he was living in a 3-story house. His wife gets a call Thursday night from his sister. Both families were supposed to be at Chaim's house for Shabbos. His wife had cooked already for Shabbos. And she gets a call from her sister. And the call goes something like this. Listen, my husband's very tired, and we decided we're not going to come. Chaim's wife said, what do you mean you're not going to come? I cooked Shabbos. Do come, don't come, back and forth. And finally, Chaim's wife said, listen, I cooked everything anyway. Let's do this. I'll pack everything up, and I'll bring the food over, so we'll be by you instead. So Kachava, that's what they agreed. Instead of both families being by Chaim's house for Shabbos, both families were by his brother-in-law for Shabbos. Okay. And Chaim describes that when he walked into his brother-in-law's apartment, on the table, there was a book called Who by Fire. Now, if you haven't read this book, it's a very, very powerful, very well worth reading book. It's a book about a woman, a very frum woman living in Yerushalayim. She's in her apartment, and all of a sudden the apartment erupts into flames. She escapes immediately into the hallway, and she's untouched. In the hallway, she realizes that her kids are still back in the apartment. She runs in, grabs one kid, runs back in, grabs a second, grabs a third. She saved all of her children, but at the end of the story, she suffered burns on 85% of her body. Now, it's a very, very moving tale because you see a woman's emunah, and you see her bitachon, but you also see what it means to be burnt alive, hence the name of the book, Who by Fire. Okay, in any case, Chaim saw this book on the coffee table, and he picked it up, and he describes that he was mesmerized. He couldn't put it down. Normally on Shabbos he'd be learning Gemara, and he read the book cover to cover, he couldn't put it down. He didn't think much about it. That Shabbos afternoon, he walks into the yeshiva for mincha, and as he walks into the Beis Medrash, he notices that everyone's looking at him. It's my tie, my suit. Right? Doesn't think much about it. Takes a sitter. After Kriyas Torah, he takes three steps forward, daven Shemona Esrei. After he's finished Shemona Esrei, he takes 3 steps back, and kind of looks up, and again notices that like everyone is looking at him. What's the deal? And he can't figure it out. After davening, he walks over to a friend of his and says, why is everybody looking at me? His friend said, you didn't hear? No, hear what? Oh, well, I'm sorry to be one to tell you this, but last night your house burned down. Apparently, 2 a.m., the furnace exploded. The building erupted into flames. There was another family in that house who were badly, badly burned. But Chaim, his wife, and his children were untouched. But here's the punchline. The pivotal moment in Chaim's existence was not that previous Thursday night. It was not with the, should we go to my house, should we go to your house? The pivotal moment in Chaim's life was the previous Rosh Hashanah when Hashem decrees who will live and who will die, but not just in an open sense. Mi ba'esh or mi b'mayim, exactly the method. How will it happen? You see, we're not privy to the fact, but we are judged on Rosh Hashanah. And there's a diyun, there's a judgment. What will be your coming year? And Hashem decrees my fate. And many, many times there are questions. Many, many times there are open questions. And many times there are questions that have interesting consequences. We normally don't have a clue to what's going on. We walk out to Rosh Hashanah and we say Lashana Tova, joyful, and we go make Kiddush, but we don't know what the decree is. What Chaim was being shown was there was a judgment the previous Rosh Hashanah whether his family should live or not, and not just that, but the method, and they were decreed to live. He had to read that book to see this was what you were saved from. Typically we're not privy, we're not aware, but the diyun, the judgment is there, the judgment is very real, and oftentimes Hashem says, yes, you'll be saved, but we're clueless. Chaim was being shown clearly. Hashem decreed, Hashem enacts it, and Hashem had you read that book so you could know it. This understanding that Hashem is intimately involved in the runnings of our life. And then coming to a clear cognition of that. And then the next step, learning to therefore trust in Hashem. Knowing that Hashem loves me, knowing that Hashem is my best interest, and knowing that Hashem knows better than I allows me to put my faith in Hashem, to trust in Hashem, to reach that level called Bitachon. Okay, questions, thoughts, observations, for or against? I'll take a drink while you put your questions together. While someone is a Nachshon ben Aminadov to ask the first question. Actually, I'll make a bracha also while we do that. I get to stall for a moment. Brachato Adonai Eloheinu melech olam shakol niyeh bidvaro. How many times after the bracha do I say, shucks, should have made that bracha the right way? Okay, yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
All right, so I'm thinking about the other family that got injured in the fire and everything. I don't know. I don't even know the question to ask. So I think I'm a kid in the household.
Right. Okay.
Some fun, like some bubbles of thoughts in my head. And you go over that with that other family that did perish and were probably, judged to not make it through.
Right. Why do good people suffer? Why is there pain? Why is there disease? Why is there illness? Why do children die? Many whys. Have we met before?
No, I don't think so.
Is this a paid plug? Did I pay you money before to say, ask this? Okay. I just want everybody to recognize that this is not a setup. Okay? But that is the ideal plug for the book. Stop surviving, start living. Thank you. And I couldn't have done better. If I scripted it, I couldn't have done better. And this book, Stop Surviving, Start Living, which I just recently published, it deals with all what I call the big deal life issues. Why does Hashem create us? Why we're here? Why is there suffering? Why is there pain? And why does apparently bad things happen to good people? It's really, I like to think of it as the first parak of Mesil Sharm in 21st century language, meaning it deals with all of the real major life issues. So it is available. Baruch Hashem, it's had a lot of success. It's sold the hardcover in the Jewish world. By the way, I'm not J.K. Rowling, so I'm going to tell you numbers that are really scary. In the Jewish world, it sold 5,000 copies, which was like, wow! And J.K. Rowling sold how many again? 5,500, I think, right? Am I close? That's a joke. No. Anyway. Point is, it's been very well. The reason I'm sharing that with you is because it's been very well received. It deals with, again, the fundamental life questions. I have copies here, and I don't want to take them back. So I'm deeply discounting them. I have some copies out back. We have a box there. You can just leave money in it. Please take a look at it. It's $10 a copy. You can just look them over. If you feel it interests you, please pick it up. But again, it deals with those issues, hopefully in a more fundamental way. And Yishkoyach for the plug. And we'll talk after. Seriously, on the serious side, if you get a chance to look at the book and you feel you still have a question, please contact me. Email works great. Rebbe@theshmuz.com, REBBE @theshmuz.com, and I'll gladly talk. Okay, this is a plug though. We have met before, and this is a paid plug.
Very good Shmuz, Rebbe. I really enjoy it.
Okay.
One of the questions I have is that in regards to Bitachon, I mean, of course it's something that we're always working on, but I wanted to know, I know you have like a Bitachon workshop or something like that you're putting together.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to know, can you explain a little bit about that?
Okay, the Bitachon workshop it's 24 shiurim that deal with these issues, Bitachon, Emunah, and helps really solidify and clarify these issues. It's kind of funny. You can be an Orthodox Jew for a real long time or for not a real long time and never really get these concepts clear. Again, just try this as an exercise. Ask your friends to define Emunah, define Bitachon. But so what the Bitachon workshop does is it goes through the basics and the not so basics of Emunah, Bitachon, levels, techniques, applications. And it's if you're interested in it, it's on the website. We're actually using it as a fundraiser. It's a fundraiser. Most of all the shmuzim are available for free. You could download them, podcasts, and there are over 200 shmuzim on different topics: Emunah, Bitachon, dominating, parenting, anger, jealousy, throughout the gamut of being a thinking from Jew. All of those are available for free. You could download the podcast for free. We do occasionally run certain fundraisers. The Bitachon workshop we're using as a fundraiser. So if you are interested, you can go to the shmuz.com. The only thing you have to remember is that it's spelled funny. It's spelled THSHMUZ. SHMUZ, the Shmuz.com. But you'll have all the information is there. Yeah. The other side of this. Yeah.
Not sure exactly how to phrase the question. You mentioned a lot of physical examples. I want this job. Hashem decides it's not for me. It's not the best for me. It doesn't work out. And so, I guess my question is, I was hoping for another example, a different kind, maybe a spiritual example. So you have physical goals, and then Hashem decides those goals are not for you. Spiritual goals. You want to raise good children. You want to raise children with this specific midah. And then Hashem forbid, you have these children and whatever.
The opposite of what you expected.
Right. And so my question is not that does Hashem control that, because obviously Hashem decided you would get those children and have that experience, or marry this person, have this experience. But my question is, if you had any insight on how to look at that, or maybe any examples of that kind of situation, and how do you look at that in terms of your Bitachon with Hashem?
Yeah, okay. The single greatest mistake that we make is we assume there's a one standard of measure. The single biggest mistake that we make in almost everything we do in this thing called being a religious Jew is we assume there's one standard of measure and I have to measure up to it. Now, if that's true, what that means is when we all leave this earth, there's going to be a yardstick, and it's going to be yay high, and each of us are going to measure up to it. How high, how close, yeah, close, no close. And that is the antithesis of reality. For you folks who are there over Shabbos, I'll repeat this. The Vilna Gaon tells us that at the end of my days, I face the following. They hold up a picture of a great person, an accomplished human being, a person who changed himself and changed the world, and they say to me, why aren't you that? And I say, little me, you want me to be that great man, the man who mastered Shas, the man who had sterling character traits? I'm but a little person. Says the Vilna Gaon, the most painful moment of a person's life is when he hears those words, that is you. That is you had you used your talents, your abilities, had you become that which you were destined to be. But you see, it's a picture of me. A picture of me based on my talents and my abilities, based on what was given to me, how much of me did I become. The standard of measure is only one. It's these were your talents, these were your abilities, how much of you did you become? 80%, 60%, 40%? From that perspective, every situation that we're dealt in life is merely an opportunity to grow, to accomplish. Some people are given poverty, some people are given wealth, some people are given disease, some people are given health. It really depends, but all of them are stage settings that allow you to grow, to accomplish, to overcome. So if the measure of the man was how much money you made, or some objective standard of you compared to someone else, the question is very valid and there is no answer. But once you understand that we're put into the world to grow and accomplish, given a few short years, and at the end of my days they ask me one question: how much of you did you become? You were given a role, you're an actor on a stage, you were given a part to play, how well did you play your part? In that framework, there's no questions. And that, again, that's a plug for the book, because I stole that. That was plagiarized material right from this book. Anyone read the book? It's chapter...
We read the book.
You read the book? What chapter?
That chapter. We read the book.
Oh, so but remember this? You remember hearing this stuff? It doesn't sound like I stole this stuff. Right out of the book. It's terrible. Plagiarism.
May I ask a
Please.
question? Rabbi Summers was mentioning in the beginning about the idea of Musar and being, so to speak, like berated, and, just this feeling that is, I would say, growing up, I always had this dread, this fear, this like I was being suffocated, like I was being, not tortured, but that this stern, heavy load was being put upon me, and that I would not be able to be me. And it wasn't until I started learning Hasidus that I recognized that there was a concept of joy and of simcha that was highlighted in the Musar. So where is this joy and this simcha that once we get a tiny portion of this Musar in our life and work on growing with it, how is it that we bring a sense of simcha and joy into what HaKadosh Baruch Hu has in store for us? How do we walk with it?
Okay, first a comment, then a response. Fair enough? the comment. Unfortunately, what you're describing is a terrible perversion of Judaism. I'm not commenting on your education and who preached that. I don't see it any longer. I've heard, but again, in my experience, I've heard that some people from a European background sometimes would teach that way. I haven't experienced it. I went to yeshiva since I'm a little guy. Maybe I wasn't listening, but no, I think I've never experienced it. I know for a fact now it's nothing that I get around. I go to many yeshivas, many schools, I don't see it, and so I have to. I don't want to apologize for your miseducation during those times, but again, Baruch Hashem, I don't see that. Now, that's a comment. In response, the answer is, what is joy? What is happiness? When a person lives in balance with themselves, when a person understands life, when a person wakes up in the morning and says, I understand why Hashem created me, I could change, I could grow, I could accomplish, there's a sense of satisfaction and joy. The single most satisfying, the single greatest sense of enjoyment that a human being ever has is growing, changing. That's what Hashem put us on a planet to do. And when a person accomplishes, when they change, when they grow, what happens is they feel a sense of balance, harmony, joy, and happiness. Giving is one way of growing. Giving to others is one way of making myself more like Hashem. But it's a process of growing, a process of changing, the process of reaching my purpose in existence that brings you in being the greatest deep satisfaction and happiness. So I think exactly what we do, meaning learning Musar, which is focusing on why did Hashem create me, why am I here, what's life about, and then getting my life in track with those things, is an exercise in happiness and joy. Take the guy in back here because Shlomo had one already. Yeah.
For example, about Amazon.
Yeah. Oh, shucks. What a shame. Yeah.
Like seriously, not. The question doesn't sound like as if I'm criticizing marriage.
I shouldn't have listened to her. Right.
What I'm really curious about is the way you phrased it. The fact that you had one feeling or thought, and then you asked your wife, and she had a different feeling or thought. So I wanted to expand the question. What I'm curious about is, in the process of investigation and trying to get to Amos and making decisions within our own lives, like I found experience happens, let's say you speak to a person you respect, whether a friend or, let's say, a rabbi, and they give an answer to a question. You said you go through kind of Gestalt steps. I want objective opinion. And let's say inside of you, you feel this is not the right thing for me. And you could ask 2 or 3 people. You could ask a spouse, you could ask a friend. So how does one make a decision and feel comfortable, I'm doing the best I can, I'm doing the right thing, when if, let's say, everything inside tells me this is the best for me, and let's say people I trust and respect in the form of spouse or Rebbe are giving different.
Okay, that's a very complex question. And that has very little to do with what actually happened in that case. See, it wasn't that I had a sense about Amazon, but it was a very risky, investment. Meaning, don't forget, there was no such. The internet then was in its infancy stage. There really was no history. There was no market. It's a projection. Now, we, in hindsight, we're all very wise. Oh, look at the internet. Wasn't it a no-brainer? It wasn't a no-brainer at all. It was a risky investment. Now, I thought it was wise. I thought it was a good shot. But if you'd ask me, am I 100% no? And my wife was prudent. She was cautious. I can't say it was reckless. Meaning, if I had a gut instinct, this is going to make $1 million, and I'm sure, and I'm 100%, and my wife said, well, I don't really know, that would have been a different situation. It was a situation where it sounded good. I liked the idea. I knew it was, listen, I wasn't taking my life savings. Again, it was a lot of money for us then, but it wasn't like every penny I had from the wedding. It was what I considered a reasonable hishtadlus. It was taking a certain amount of money and putting it on what I considered somewhat risky, but hey, it's not a bad idea. My wife's feeling was, it's not such a good idea, so I said, fine. So the case that I presented is really very different than yours. You're asking a much more difficult question. Now, one of the things that our Rebbe, Zatzal, taught us was to be shoel eitzah. To ask advice. Ask advice of people around you. Certainly ask advice of people who are wiser than you. And the reason why the Shiva would often tell us to ask advice is because wise men ask advice. The president has advisors. Why does the president have a team of advisors on every single issue? And the reason is because as smart as you may be, there are other perspectives, other way of doing things. There's a broader outlook. And unless you're an arrogant buffoon, you recognize that some things you know and some things you don't. And I have a rule in life. Find your experts and trust them. I have an expert that I trust in almost every area that I need. What that means is, if I have a legal question, I have people I know who are learned and wise in legal affairs. I ask them a question and I then trust them. I have a doctor that I use, and I trust my doctor. Now, does that mean I'm a blind fool? Certainly not. If my doctor says, get this operation, I'll go for a second medical opinion, maybe a third. But after I've clarified my experts, and I know that they're worthwhile, and I asked a second opinion and maybe a third, I then trust in them. Why? Because they have greater wisdom than I do. Now, the system of asking Eitzah is very similar to that. You have to find people who are wiser than you, who understand things better than you, and you have to then learn to trust them. Does that mean blind faith? Does that mean if your gut say, this is going to kill me? And no, but it means that you have to learn to have a healthy respect, and you have to ask advice and be willing and able to listen. It's a very difficult question you're asking, to be honest with you, and it's a very hard one. Rabbi Summers and I had a very easy time. When you study under a man and you understand his way and his brilliance, you trust him because you understand he has an objectivity, he has a wisdom, he has a brilliance. And the problem that most of us have is we don't really have people that know so much more about life. We don't have people that we're really close with. And one of the things that a wise person will do is get yourself a Rav. Make sure that you have a Rav, a person that you know, that you trust, that you can rely on. And because in life there are many questions that you're going to feel one way, feel the other way, and you need expert advice. So I'm not sure I've answered your question. Hopefully I spoke long enough that you forgot your question. All right, one last question, thought, observation? Yeah.
So this is kind of the converse of what my friend said. Can you have Bitachon but be sad about your circumstances?
Okay, it's a fair question. The answer is yes and no. It depends on your level of bitachon. What I mean by that is as follows. With perfect bitachon, no. And perfect bitachon means I understand that I'm here for future years, and Hashem created an exact stage setting for me. Hashem put this into here, because this is perfect for me. And this is exactly what I need. With perfect bitachon, sadness doesn't exist. Now, the odds of you and I reaching that level are very slim. So we kind of like mutter through and do as well as we can. So in a sort of mid-range bitachon, I trust in Hashem. To me, this looks bleak and bad, and it's tough. I know that Hashem has some better picture in mind for me, so I rely on the fact that Hashem knows better than I, but I still feel that sort of sadness or frustration with the situation. That means I'm somewhere kind of in between. In theory, in other words, meaning if I total, absolute trust in Hashem, then I know that Hashem loves me, Hashem is bringing me to this, and Hashem is doing this because I'm going to dance for joy. When I leave this earth, I'm going to dance for joy and wish I could have more of that suffering that I so disdained and so hated, because I see its growth, I see how it changed me, how it helped me. So, our job is to grow, our job is to try, and do the best we can. A question? Yeah? No, not okay. Yeah.
Going back to a question you asked earlier, is how much of you did you become?
Yeah.
Very difficult question. Imagine somebody who's basically a high school star athlete, a couple of sports, letterman, decides to pursue. Now, I'm going to apply this to athletics. It could be in a career. The person goes and he pursues basketball as the means, and he finds out, later on, there's not that much that a 5'11" basketball player can do as far as a career. And really, after a few years of trying to become a pro and so on and so forth, he realized, he would have been a Hall of Fame first baseman. Because he's not a great runner, but he's a good shooter. So, but the thing is, he finds out years later, did he become what he could become? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of regret. Somebody can spend 20 years maybe in a profession that was a reasonable profession, and there can be a lot of charat, a lot of regret over, I should have gone down a different path. Does Hashem present to us, you can double back and change everything?
Okay.
And reach did they become the you that they could have become?
Okay. Well, I appreciate your question. I have a perspective, I think, a little bit differently than you, that may shade it a bit. You view sort of like, I would ask the question more deeply. Why does Hashem want you to work? Well, let me phrase it this way. How much money does Hashem have? A lot of money, right? I mean, he owns diamond mines in South Africa, oil wells in Saudi Arabia, he owns real estate in Manhattan. Right? God's got lots and lots of capital. Okay, good. So why does Hashem want you to work? Does Hashem need your money? Does Hashem need you to put numbers in boxes or to write plays or whatever you do? Working is part of your avodas Hashem. Working is part of your life experience, because when you work for a living, all of a sudden you're tested in very real ways. When you have to work for a living, and the question is, are you honest or not? But you're working 8 hours, 10 hours a day, and one little change, one little white lie, and you can make thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's a life test. When you work very hard, and do you spend your money on yeshiva tuition, or do you say, listen, maybe my kids don't need the best, I'll put them in public school. That's a life test. And when you really work hard, and you really engage in this world, that's a life test. But it's exactly that. It's not relevant. Hashem doesn't care if you're a lawyer, a doctor, an Indian chief. But the purpose of work is to shape you, mold you into what you'll be for eternity. Not as a doctor, not as a lawyer, but as a human being. Those are all stage settings. So you're asking me if someone went into this stage setting or that stage setting. It doesn't matter. It's all, if you want to use the mushal of a gym. We're in this gym called life. The purpose of life is to grow. We're presented many obstacles, many situations. All of them present me with the following. It's a challenge. How do I respond? It's a very, very high wall. Do I crumble up or do I transcend? Do I overcome it or do I shrink? But all of these obstacles and all of these courses are irrelevant. They don't matter. What matters is my response to them, what I become. So in the sense of your mushal, I would say the answer is it's irrelevant. Hashem doesn't care if you're a lawyer, a doctor, if you're a first baseman, or you play basketball. It doesn't matter. The question is, what did you do in life? How did you respond? Did you grow? Did you become honest? Did you become ethical? Did you become a Baal Midas? Were you kind? Were you sweet? Were you generous? Did you shape yourself into a Ben Torah? And did you learn? Did you daven? Did you become what you were destined to be? So in that sense, all of the state settings are irrelevant. Okay, folks, I'm running out of steam. So if anyone has questions afterwards, please feel free to come over. There are books, copies in the back, and just leave the money in the box if you're interested. And again, pleasure. Thank you.